Still there?
All right, give me 1 second because
Sure.
YouTube's got to pick it up. Once YouTube says it's being picked up, then I can say start recording. Oh, it auto-lived. So yeah, so all right. So let me give the background. Christian, thank you for consenting to doing an ad hoc live stream to explain to me how the hell Delta log transactions work. For some background, just for anybody that watches this in the future, but also just to revisit some of the context, there's transaction identifiers in the Delta log protocol. I've been working on Delta RS and some of the writer code, trying to figure out what the right API is for writers and interactions between, applications using Delta RS like Kafka Delta Ingest, which Christian is working on, et cetera, how they should be actually writing entries to the Delta log. And so where I was getting confused is that there's this transaction entry, an action, a Texan. Maybe it's not transaction. Maybe it's supposed to be Texan. So there's the Texan.
I like that name.
Action. There's the Texan action, which shows up in only one of our test data sets. And so it's a simple data set, but there's this, like when I think of a transaction, I think of a begin transaction and an end transaction. And that's clearly not what this is. And so Christian, before I started the recording, you were about to really start to explain this to me. And something about streaming.
Yeah. So I love the pronunciation Texan. I'm going to start using that. So the Texan action is really for streaming systems. So a lot of the workloads that you see examples of around Delta Lake are more about batch, and most of Delta RS, what's there is primarily to support batch, but this Texan action is really specifically for supporting streaming systems. And if you think about a stream where a Delta Lake table is the sink of that stream, meaning that's the final destination of the data. Right. That stream, if you have Delta Lake as a sink, that stream must also have a source, right? And Kafka is a really common source for streams that terminate in a Delta sink. So we can use that as an example. And this Texan action that appears in the Delta log is really to provide applications a way to track back to where they left off when reading from the source. So to kind of oversimplify a little bit, but I think it's a good example. If you had a single Kafka topic with a single partition as your source, and you had a single application handling that topic partition, you could have, and let's say your app ID is called banana, right? So you could you could create a Texan action with app ID banana, and where the version is a Kafka offset, and then that way, if banana terminates and it needs to restart later and figure out where it left off, what was the last offset I wrote to my Delta Lake table, it can go read the transaction log and look and see. All right, so for the app ID banana, what was the last offset that I committed to a Delta Lake table? And it can find that offset, and then it can go seek its Kafka consumer to that offset and pick up exactly where it left off.
Okay, so version, I think version has to be an integer
it's a long
value, a long value. And then this is blah blah blah. So this is just a Delta log that I just copied for. So I think I'm following you here. So now that I've got this, this is my Delta log. What is like in this contrived example where I've got a, just a single topic partition, banana.
Right. Well, so it might not be relevant to where you're going, but I will say, assuming this is a single log entry, the protocol forbids you to have 2 Texan entries for banana. So you can only have 1 Texan entry here. You can't have version 0 and version 1, 2, 3, 4 in the same log file. That might not be relevant to.
So there'd be, so what we would really have is we'd have like, this would be banana 1, and then let me make banana 2.json.
Yes. Yes.
And so our Delta table has banana, and then banana.json, and then banana2.json, and that composes, that's all we've got right now, right?
Yeah. So on top, so the file you have on top here, we could say this is Delta table at version 1, and the file on bottom would be Delta table at version 2. Yeah. And so at version 1, we've only consumed 1 message from the banana topic, since the offset that we recorded there is 0, which would, I think, would indicate, we've read and written data up to offset 0, which is exactly 1 message. And then, so we have 1,234 messages in the second data file.
So I guess some of my confusion is coming in this, there is an add action here as well.
Yep.
So
the file on bottom would also have an add.
So you can't have a transaction.
Well, I mean, I guess you could just have a transaction without an add. I guess.
Let me go to the protocol spec. Like,
yeah.
Are like for one of these files to be created, is a Texan action going to be present, or is another action going to be present with a Texan action every single time? Is that guaranteed?
No, I don't think it's guaranteed. I think with the case you were mentioning before, like if, for example, maybe you want to roll back, maybe you take banana down, you run a batch delete on your Delta table, and that creates a Delta action that does not include a Texan action, and that just contains a remove or several removes of Parquet files. And then you want to roll banana back to a previous offset in Kafka. And to do that, you might create a Delta transaction that all it contains is one Texan action that rolls it back to a specific offset, so that next time you start banana up, it'll go see, the last Delta table version is at offset, let's say 500 instead of 1,234. So that means I need to go seek my Kafka consumer to offset 500 and collect all that data before I write my next add. So they are decouplable in that sense. You could just have a Texan action, but the happy path though is, if you have a healthy running streaming system, the typical output is going to be like a transaction and an add, a transaction and an add in each log entry. Yeah.
So tell me about, I saw this behavior in Kafka Delta ingest, where basically every time that there's let me go to the code that I was working with. Where was this? This was in create add, or no, it's with commit write file. I've updated this, so let me go to the Delta Lake ext version of this. So there's this write file thing that actually does the file write, which creates an add action. And then there is, let me go to the other file. I think it was in lib that I saw this. Where's that Texan? There we are.
Yeehaw! Oh, wait.
So like there's this behavior here in Kafka Delta ingest where the Texan action is created, and then we write the batch in, we write the file basically.
Write the Parquet file.
We write the Parquet file. Yeah. And then we update the Delta log. What in the Kafka Delta ingest system, what value is this Texan action actually providing?
So this is actually in flux right now, but I'm gonna refer to the behavior that exists right now in Kafka Delta ingest rather than where it's headed. So the Texan action right now is referring to a record in what we call the write-ahead log in Kafka Delta ingest, and that's where. So if you consider the banana example where we had a single topic, single partition, so we only ever had one offset to track. That's not the case in any real world Kafka topic. And so what we were using in Kafka Delta ingest was a write-ahead log where we store the offsets for all partitions. And so rather than trying to encode all of those offsets in a single Texan action, we use the write-ahead log entry. And one write-ahead log entry contains all partition offsets for current state. And that write-ahead log entry's transaction ID, I know we've used the word transaction like 400 times by now, but that one write-ahead log entry's transaction ID refers to all of the offsets for all of the Kafka partitions, so that any worker handling any partition could go consult the write-ahead log to figure out what's the offset for the partitions that I care about, that I need to go seek to before I.
So let's imagine that this is our banana example is being written to by Kafka Delta ingest, and so I'll have an ad. I'll make an ad in both files. So in the first example, what I'm just playing this back, so you tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. In the first Delta log file that we've got here, we've got a Texan action that says what we're doing here corresponds to the write-ahead log entry 7331.
Yep.
Right. And then in the second one, all it's saying really is what we're doing here, what's contained within this file, or this log entry, which is just the ad, is just going to conform to 8132. Yeah.
Right. So you lost me a little bit there, but I'll repeat back what you repeated back. So in both cases, the version refers to a write-ahead log transaction ID.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you look at, you might imagine if we've got three partitions, write-ahead log entry 7331 describes the offset that each of those partitions was at when this Parquet file was written. So basically the data contained in the ad contains data or puts the Delta table in a state where the whole thing accounts for data up through the partition offsets referenced by the write-ahead log entry 7331.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got it. So I think this isn't a question for you. We've got two other mechanisms in the Delta protocol that allow carrying some of this information. One of them we see here, which is commit info. I don't understand why the Texan action exists with commit info, but that may have something to do with checkpoints.
Yes,
which will blow away
exactly.
But the add action also, and I couldn't find any examples of this. The add action or any action supports tags on it. Like there's this arbitrary map that you can throw at the end of any action, tags, but I can't find in these publicly available test data sets that we have examples of putting tags on these actions.
That is interesting because now that you mention it, I think I vaguely remember seeing that in the protocol doc, but maybe because it was called tags, because of some subliminal or subconscious thing, I completely ignored it. I see there though, map string. That's interesting, and I also wonder if that's preserved in any meaningful way in checkpoints as well.
I don't know, but either way, I have to actually get back to work.
Sure.
and I know it's a little bit later in your time zone. I think this helps me understand the Texan action enough to continue doing some of the Delta writer work that I've got planned for later this evening.
Cool. So just to mention,
yep.
the way we're using the text in action is about to change in a very big way in Kafka Delta ingest.
Yeah.
It's probably a bigger conversation than we would want to have here, I think. But
well, for the just so I know from my work later tonight, Kafka Delta ingest still has a need to provide a text in action.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be providing multiple texts per log entry. And what we're going to do is we're still going to have a distinct app ID in each one. But we're going to have an app ID per partition.
Right. So, I remember reading that.
Yeah. So we'll have like banana 1, banana 2, banana 3. They'll all be potentially part of the same log entry.
I think it's safe to say that maybe you shouldn't be naming things.
Yeah. Well, I think we both already knew that.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream. And yeah,